Thank you for joining our public meeting for two exciting projects on the 3rd Street alignment. My name is Heather Murphy, and I will be your host and moderator tonight. If you prefer to listen to this meeting in Spanish, we do have a Spanish language line, and I would like to introduce Mr. Mario Barajas to explain this option in Spanish. Mario, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Heather.
We're getting a bad echo, Mario. Can you mute your other phone?
Yeah, it's not.
How about in the meantime, I will put the numbers in the chat box.
How about now? Are you able to hear me now?
Perfectly, thank you.
I apologize. Good afternoon. My name is Mario Barajas. As Heather mentioned, I will be tonight's interpreter. I'm going to review the instructions of how to log on to our Spanish speakers. And as you can see there, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Mario Barajas. Voy a ser el intérprete de esta noche. Como pueden ver ahí en sus pantallas, si acaso desean escuchar la interpretación, pueden marcar por sus teléfonos al número 602-534-1000. De ahí van a estar marcando el número de la reunión, que viene siendo 57271. Y luego va a pulsar el signo de número, o sea, el pound. Y de ahí van a poder escuchar la interpretación del español. Gracias. Thank you, Heather.
We still had a little trouble hearing you, so I did put the information in the chat box so that everyone can see that, which brings me to our little tutorial for WebEx tonight. Since some people may not be familiar with this platform, I'd like to direct your attention to the little speech bubble in the lower right where the yellow angled arrow is pointing to. That will open up some other features for you to use. Tonight we will be using the chat box for you to submit your comments to the project team. Not questions, but comments that you'd like the project team to evaluate as they move forward with these two studies. And then we invite you to put your questions for the project team and for tonight's meeting in the Q&A section. So again, the speech bubble on the lower right should open up these two options, the Q&A for your questions and the chat for your comments that you or statements that you'd like the project team to have in front of them as they make their decisions on this project. So let me now introduce tonight's panel, some of whom are here in case there's a question that requires their expertise. We always have a few more people available online for those specialty type questions. So please introduce yourselves and your relationship to the project in the order that your names appear on the screen.
Good evening, I'm Keeney Knudsen. I'm the Director of Street Transportation for the City of Phoenix. This project is under the guise of the Street Transportation Department, so my staff is in charge of running this project.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Locke. I'm the Deputy Director for Street Transportation Department. My staff is managing this project. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leticia Vargas. I'm the Special Projects Administrator for the Street Transportation Department, and my team is overseeing this project as well. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Marielle Brown. I'm the Active Transportation Program Manager in the Street Transportation Department, and I will be presenting the project and proposed alternatives tonight.
Good evening. My name is Chris Milner. We're serving as a consultant for the city on the Rio Salado pedestrian and bike bridge project.
Good evening, I'm Tiffany Halprin. I'm with the Urban Culture Design Project, and we are serving as consultants for the 3rd Street connector from Lincoln to Rio Salado.
Thank you so much. Keeney, I'd like to invite you to offer some opening remarks.
Thank you, Heather. And I just wanted to thank everyone for participating in this meeting and welcome everybody as well. It is a great opportunity for us to talk about not just one, but two great projects this evening. And we really want to emphasize the feedback and the input we're looking for from the public. So no matter your connection to these two projects, we want to hear what you have to say, what your thoughts are about them. Obviously, we're still in the midst of a public health situation that requires us to, or puts us in a position where a virtual meeting is something we need to do. So we do appreciate your time and working through this. I know sometimes the technology can be tricky, but not just for us, but also for those who are listening in. So I do want to ask for your patience on that, and hopefully this works for you to provide input. But we're also going to have a lot of other ways to be able to provide input outside of this meeting as well. I wanted to just highlight that we are the 5th largest city in the country, and we are also one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And so with that growth and with the size that we're becoming as a city, I think these two projects highlight our need to be able to provide options for our residents, for the public, for visitors, to be able to connect. And so I think that's why I'm glad we're able to talk about two projects that span and connect in neighborhoods, connect in areas of the city, and especially cross a riverway, as well as be able to provide connectivity as part of this project. So it is very important for us to make sure we're having safe and comfortable connections and mobility choices for our residents, and this is no different. And so I know my team is very, very dedicated to bringing about projects like these ones that will meet the needs of our residents and those who use them at their leisure. So this is something I'm very excited about. I'm happy that we have these two projects to talk about. So I won't be talking much more here. I just want to cede my time to the project team, who's going to share a lot more details with you. But I just want to emphasize how important it is for you to be part of this process, to not just be attending, but to be engaged in it. So thank you again, and I wish you well and enjoy the meeting.
Before Marielle begins her presentation, we'd like to gather a little interactive information from you tonight, so we know who's with us tonight. Like Keeney said, in this virtual environment, we don't know who's actually joining us and what their relationship is to the project area. So you should be seeing on your screen a polling question. Hang on for a second. I think I was supposed to clear my test results and then resubmit it. So let me close that and resubmit the poll. Oh no, now it's not letting me do that. Bear with me, please. See if I can reopen the poll question. Okay, for some reason it is not letting me do that. So we'll come back to that before we open the Q&A session. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but Marielle, please go ahead and begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Heather, and I'm excited to see those results of the poll when we get it up and working. Thank you everyone for being here tonight and for taking part in the meeting. I'm really excited that I get the opportunity to present these two great projects to the community and to hear from you on what your priorities are and what you think of the proposed alternatives. So right now, we are looking at two separate projects in one meeting. These projects connect, and so we chose to do the public outreach together. And that's the 3rd Street connector going from the Rio Salado to Lincoln Street along the 3rd Street corridor, and then the bicycle and pedestrian bridge over the Rio Salado. So the combined public outreach effort was really an opportunity for us to make sure that we're respecting the community's time and really getting a chance to engage thoroughly and hear from everyone in the project area. So This is our first public meeting for this project, but it's not our first public outreach opportunity for this project. We've been doing stakeholder outreach, and we've also been attending standing community meetings and talking to community groups about what they would like to see. We also conducted a preliminary survey in August, and throughout the evening, I'll be talking about the results from that survey and how they help to influence and guide the design alternatives that we're proposing. So together, these projects offer numerous benefits, and they work together to reach the same goals. And that's really about connecting people with enjoyable and safe biking and walking infrastructure, making sure that people can get to the Rio Salado path network in an enjoyable way, and not just connect to the great paths in the city of Phoenix along the Rio Salado, but also connect regionally. The paths now connect all the way through to Tempe and Mesa. So this is really a regional connection that we're looking at, along with all of those connections along the 3rd Street corridor and then into downtown. So before we dive into the details of the project alternatives, I want to give you an overview of how the process works. This is a pre-design process. So the goal of this process is really to figure out, what are we going to build? How are we going to build it? What's the right approach? So we're trying to get to 30% design, and that means final design concept. So we have an idea that we can bring forward to start looking for funding and start figuring out the details of construction, of design and construction eventually. But right now we're in the early stage of what it takes to get to look for funding. And I do want to share that we have already submitted a grant application to the Maricopa Association of Governments for funding for the design and construction of the 3rd Street portion of this project. The bicycle and pedestrian bridge is a much larger project. We will have to look for much larger grant funding opportunities, but we are actively looking for those grant funding opportunities for the 3rd Street project. So far in this process, we have worked through kind of setting what are the project boundaries and goals. You know, we're trying to connect people along 3rd Street and across the river. With the survey and stakeholder outreach, we really got to learn about what the priorities are of the community and figure out who we're serving, why we want to connect, how we want to connect, what the priorities are. We've also been working with our great team of consultants, designers, and planners to look at what are the project constraints and challenges to understand really what is possible in this area. And using all of that information, we have drafted alternatives that we're going to present tonight. And tonight will be an opportunity to hear from the community. The survey that's launching tonight will be an opportunity to hear from the community, and that input that you share about the alternatives will help us propose a final design concept. So I'm going to start with the first project, Lincoln Street to Rio Salado paths. This project goes along the 3rd Street corridor from the Rio Salado to Lincoln Street. And you might notice we keep saying corridor because there's not a continuous street that goes through this area. The corridor has a lot of different conditions and different, layouts. So one of the first steps in this project was to conduct a survey and hear from the community on what their priorities were. We had 117 respondents for that survey, and tonight I'm going to talk about those results. Before I dive into it, I want to thank everyone in the audience who took part in the survey. It really helped us to figure out how we can go forward with this project. So one thing we heard about bikeways in this corridor is that safe bikeways are a big priority. When we asked people about their trade-offs on what they would like to see, preserving landscaping versus parking versus a safe bikeway, because these things all take space, we heard that safe bikeways were the biggest priority for the respondents. It was over 80% of people said that was their number one priority. Although, of course, these are all priorities that we want to explore. And then drilling down, after we asked about what are your priorities, we asked, what kind of bike lanes do you want to see? What is that safe bikeway that you would like to see? And over 70% of respondents wanted to see a two-way protected bike lane. So here's a picture of a two-way protected bike lane that was recently built in the city of Phoenix. It's on 3rd Avenue from Roosevelt to McDowell. And so it looked like there was a lot of interest from the respondents in that particular layout. And so that helped to inform the alternatives that we're going to present tonight. So going into the existing conditions, the 3rd Street corridor has a lot of challenges and opportunities and just a lot of variation. So there are sections that are residential that have curb and gutter and sidewalk and planting area, as you can see on the left. There are also areas that don't have curb and sidewalk or curb and gutter and sidewalk. And then there are also areas where we don't have a full street, where we have a drainage easement or a railway easement. So tonight we're going to be looking at a variety of proposals that kind of address these different situations. And again, here you see that variety of existing conditions as the street kind of stops and starts, and the opportunities to add in more sidewalk, curb, and gutter potentially. These maps go into the detail, but what you can see here is in the northern part of the section, we have curb and gutter and sidewalk. And the southern portion, we have some sidewalk. Then we have sections where there are no streets south of Yuma to Pima. And then from Pima to Durango, we do have the street again, but we don't have full sidewalk coverage. South of Durango, south of Durango, we go to under the freeway and then kind of along a railroad easement and a drainage easement. So there is no street in that area. So with that in mind, we have two sets of alternatives. We have the northern alternative, and this really applies to all areas where there is street. We're looking at proposing the first alternative of two-way protected bike lanes. And then on the second alternative, we're looking at a bike boulevard, and that would be really looking at an option that preserves parking, but also adds traffic calming and really makes sure it's a safe shared street for people biking and driving. And I want to go back to this two-way protected bike lane and emphasize that, you know, we won't be changing the sidewalks, but we will have to remove the existing on-street parking in order to put in that two-way protected bike lane. Whereas with the bike boulevard, we'd be able to maintain parking on one side of the street, but it would be shared space for people driving and biking. And the southern portion of the corridor, and the areas where there's not an existing street, we have a different set of options, of course. So we're really looking at two alternatives. One, where we would have a shared use path, and that's for everyone, people walking, biking, using strollers, using assisted devices. Everyone would be on one path, one wide path. The second option would be the opportunity to separate people biking and people walking. So you would have two parallel paths, one for people walking, one for people biking. And I'm very interested to hear what people would prefer in this, because I know that there are strong opinions on both sides. So moving south from those areas, the next project, the second project that we're here to talk about, is the bike ped bridge at the Rio Salado. And it's really part of an opportunity to reimagine the Rio Salado. So this project would again connect across the river. It would connect South Central Phoenix to both sides of the Rio Salado. It gives people the opportunity to recreate, to exercise, and to really enjoy the existing paths that we have along the Rio Salado, which are just an amazing place to go. So any opportunity to connect is important. And then It also gives people the opportunity to travel in and out of South Central Phoenix by bike or by foot if they're commuting as well. So an overview of the project location that we're looking at is from Central Avenue to 7th Street. So we talk about being along the 3rd Street alignment, but for something like a bridge, you have to consider what's the floodplain, you know, what's going to be the impact to the wetlands. And so we ask questions about that on the survey, and we'll dive into what those issues are. But tonight, I just want to call out that, or just for now, I want to call out that we do have 3 different alignments we're looking at, and they all vary in length. So the 1st Street is the longest one, but it does connect directly to the Nina Mason Pulliam Audubon Center. The 3rd Street alignment is, of course, along the alignment, and it's kind of the middle length. And then the last alignment is the 6th Street alignment, which is the shortest alignment, but of course it is kind of the least direct alignment as well. So in our initial public survey, again, we got 117 responses. We asked people about the bridge and their preference. And then in addition to the survey, for the bridge project, we worked with the Sagrado to do additional community engagement and reached out to Academia del Pueblo and Audubon, Arizona, to hear more from residents and stakeholders in the area. So we asked people, if there were a bridge, how would you like to travel in this area in the future? And we saw from our respondents that there was a lot of interest in biking and walking in this area in the future. There was also interest in driving and taking public transit, but we can see people really do want to access this area. And so then we asked, well, if there were a bridge, how often would you come to enjoy the bridge? And we had almost a quarter of our respondents say that they would go to the bridge daily. So to me, that looks like there's a lot of interest in this project. There's a lot of interest in connecting across the Rio Salado. We also have over 40% of respondents saying they would go weekly and about 20% going monthly. So we really saw a lot of interest in using this proposed bridge. We also asked people, given the choice between those trade-offs of a more direct bridge or minimizing impacts, temporary impacts to wetlands, which would you prefer? And we really saw, you know, this is a hard question. There was not a clear winner. Over 40% of people said a direct bridge alignment, but then almost 50% of people said that they would prefer to minimize temporary impacts to existing wetlands. So that really helped our design team to look at, well, what are the options, and to understand that we needed to offer multiple alignments to help everyone understand the trade-offs of what we're looking at. And so this is the opportunities and constraints map, and it's a good way to understand kind of, you know, what are these trade-offs? So the red stripes show you where that floodway is, and then extending out of there, there's the floodplain. So as we look at building a bridge, we have to consider what those impacts are to the floodway, and we also have to look at what are the temporary impacts to the wetlands. I'm so sorry. All right. Okay, there we go. So these are the 3 alternative alignments. It's the same alignments I already showed, and we'll be looking to hear your input tonight in the conversation afterwards, and then also in the survey. And again, we're looking at these 3 alignments, one which connects directly into the Audubon Center, but is the longest alignment or the longest bridge, the medium-sized bridge span, which would have less of an impact, temporary impact to the wetlands, and goes along 3rd Street, and then the 6th Street alignment, which really seeks to minimize the temporary impacts to the wetlands. It's the shortest bridge, but it's also maybe the least direct from the 3rd Street alignment. So our timeline for this is, first, we're here tonight to talk with you about the project. and to hear from you. We have the survey that we're launching tonight. And after we wrap up that survey, we'll really have the opportunity to have heard from the community to help guide the final steps of the pre-design process. We're going to complete our pre-design process in spring of 2022. And in early 2022, we'll have our final public meeting to come back and share with you what that final preferred alternative is. And then the next step, the final step, is really looking for funding opportunities for design and construction. So that will be how we move this project forward, looking for kind of those larger funding opportunities for something as large and important as a bridge, and then also looking for regional funding for 3rd Street. So please take the time to fill out the survey. It's on our project website, which is right here on this page, and it's also the same project website that you would have used to register for the meeting tonight. Look out for our community public meeting, our second public meeting in early 2022. And that's when we'll be able to share the preferred alternative based off of what we hear from the community and based off of those design opportunities and constraints. And all of the updates about the project will be available on our website. You can also call the project hotline if you have any questions or comments about the project. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Heather Murphy to see if we can do our interactive poll and also to run the questions and answers portion of the evening. So thank you so much, and I'm really excited to hear from you.
Yes, Marielle, thank you so much. That was an information-packed presentation. I will go ahead and open the poll right now. And again, what we're asking is for what your relationship to the project area is, whether you are a resident and live nearby, whether you're a commuter and just pass through this area, if you work or own a business in this particular area, or other. And if you do answer other, if you would let us know in the chat box so that we can kind of keep track of who's with us tonight. And I'll give a couple more seconds for everyone to answer this interactive portion of the meeting. And then I'm going to go to the questions that are entered in the Q&A section. And again, if you have questions or comments or things that you would like the project team to evaluate and consider, we'll ask you to please use the chat function for that. If you have a question that you'd like to have answered tonight with our esteemed panel of experts, go ahead and please enter your question in the Q&A section. So we've just got a couple of seconds left, and then I'll close the poll and I will open it up and share the results with you so you can see who else was in the room with us tonight. I'm just waiting for the poll to officially end. Are you able to see the poll results?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. So the technology worked on our behalf tonight. So thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and save the poll results and go ahead and clear it back to the presentation and check to see if we have any questions in the Q&A section. And so far, we do not. Now, I know this group has questions, so please don't be shy, but please go ahead and answer, ask your questions in the Q&A. we did have somebody who was able to see the poll results but not answer on the poll question because they were on mobile. And please use the chat feature for that, or just let us know. I think you're in the downtown area. We do have a question. What does the city envision for growth along the 3rd Street corridor? Do you anticipate a lot more, sorry, it just closed up, but do you anticipate a lot more residential units being built like the Battery? If a lot of growth is anticipated, parking becomes a major conversation.
I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm going to be the one to voice up in response to that. I guess I probably will. That's something I'm not exactly sure. That's something we can work with our, we have another sister department, the Planning and Development Department, who can provide some additional information related to growth patterns and also zoning for potential developments along that corridor. I think, the question I read here is concerns about the parking impacts. But as new developments come in, there are requirements for them to determine how their residents or the people are going to be, if we're talking about housing, how their residents, or if it's a business, how their workers are going to be able to access, the building, whether that's being on site parking, but off-street parking really shouldn't be the solution to parking solutions for any development. At least as we're working through this, and in my mind, I would be concerned about the needs of transportation along the roadway, and probably less about on-street parking, but that doesn't mean it isn't part of the conversation. But that's something we can definitely look into to make sure as we're working on this project that we're considering how development will occur and where the needs might be for on-street parking.
Thank you, Keeney. Next question. What was the consideration of locating the route around or along 3rd Avenue?
So I can answer this question.
For 3rd Street, sorry.
Yeah, well.
I just read the question as it was typed in.
No worries. So we have projects on 3rd Avenue and 3rd Street, so it makes sense. The city has been looking at opportunities to connect along 3rd Street for quite a while. So we are right now in the process of constructing a project along 3rd Street north of downtown. We've also in the past looked at opportunities to connect along 3rd Street in this area. It's part of our bike master plan. And for this project, we're going farther south than we dreamed possible in the bike master plan and connecting into the Rio Salado. It's also an opportunity to make sure that there's kind of a bikeable and walkable high comfort pathway, or a path for people biking and walking as we put in the light rail project, which is going to be a great opportunity for transit. We also looked at the opportunity to really make sure that there's kind of this great biking and walking parallel path as well.
If I could also share into that, Marielle, another great opportunity that we have with this 3rd Street alignment is the ability to get under I-17. There's an existing structure already in place, and it's the old right-of-way for the railroad. So it gives us a great opportunity to use that amenity to be able to get across or on the other side of I-17 over to the Rio Salado.
Yes, and thank you, Mark.
The last thing I wanted to piggyback on the two of you is also to say that because of the railroad easement and the drainage easement, there's this sort of amazing thing that happened, which is this open space that lines up with the 3rd Street alignment. So there's no structure really to work around. We have other things to work around, but not for instance, we don't have to move a building. So it's really incredible.
Well, thank you all. We had a question about, and Marielle, you may want to flash up this particular slide to explain the second option that included parking, showing people riding bicycles in the middle of the street.
All right, so this option is really about creating a bike boulevard type of design. So yes, the bicycles would be in the middle of the street. They would not have a dedicated lane, but instead we'd be looking at other design features to make sure that the traffic on the street is calmed, that there's not too much traffic along the street, so that people can comfortably share that that space with people biking and driving. And I know that we often say, like, you know, there's always interest in separated bikeways, but we did want to offer a safe option that does include parking as well. A lot of times, you know, I think a lot of us probably learned to bike on a street, on a neighborhood street that did not necessarily have separated bike lanes. So the bike boulevard design is really trying to recreate that feeling of a low speed, safe neighborhood street where people can bike.
Next question. There are businesses south of Buckeye Road. Would you need to buy property to make this pathway, and have you had contact with any of those businesses?
So for this project, there are definitely right-of-way or easement considerations that we have to work on. In order to do that, we have to follow a very set process and make sure that we're reaching out to businesses on the correct timeline. So right now, we're still trying to get an idea of the alignment and what the recommendations might be, kind of what the alternatives would be, before we start knocking on doors and really making that contact. It's we want to be sure that we know where we're going with this before we make that contact. But also there are requirements around the process.
Thank you, Marielle. 3rd Avenue has a connection with the Sonoran Bikeway. Does 3rd Street connect to another bikeway?
So this project is the opportunity to connect to a very significant regional bikeway, which is the Rio Salado Path, and which offers more opportunities to connect to bikeways throughout the region. And this section of 3rd Street will take you to Lincoln, and then it's kind of one connection and a larger connection. So we are building, as I said, we're building bike infrastructure to the north. It does not connect at this point, but it's kind of, you know, project by project, we're looking at those opportunities to connect up our bikeways. And this is one step in getting from the Rio Salado to downtown. And then as we look at this project, we can start looking at what's the next step in the connection.
Thanks, Marielle. What consideration was given to use Central Avenue with the light rail going down Central Avenue and creating bike paths or a shared lane, such as what is in place in Midtown?
So the Central Avenue project does include bike infrastructure. It's a separate project, and they're continuing, you know, they're getting ready to go into construction for that project. For this project, we were really looking for a low stress, safe connection to the Rio Salado and kind of through the neighborhood. So they're complementary, you know, they're both going to be great biking and walking options, but one is really focused on being that family friendly, slow, safe, low stress route. And I'm sure that you can find out more about the bikeways on the Valley Metro website.
Thanks, Marielle. We have a question about emergency vehicles. What about access to this pathway for emergency vehicles, especially south of Buckeye Road?
So I think that as we get into design, that's certainly something that we'll be looking at. For all of our paths, as we're looking at the construction of them, we have to consider what maintenance vehicles are going to do, how they're going to access those paths. And so as we're building for that, we're also looking at what is the emergency vehicle access. So that's really kind of a design and construction detail that we will be looking at.
That's right, because this is only in the conceptual stage right now.
Certainly, and you know, as we're looking at paths, like we're always building paths that allow our maintenance vehicles access, so we'll be sure to make sure that there's other types of vehicle access as needed in an emergency.
And another question related to the South Central extension of the light rail. How will this project support or add to the South Central extension of the light rail?
That's a great question. So I think that this project will really be a great opportunity to help connect people who might be going to a South Central light rail station. You know, most transit trips don't start and end at the station. You're always going from your house to your job or to a store to from some origin to some destination, to be very technical. And so this will help people kind of access, you know, maybe walk along or bike along a low stress path in a direct way to get to that station. It's also going to be a great destination for people who might want to bike along the path. Maybe they can take the light rail to be able to access this great new regional amenity of a bridge or a bike and pedestrian path. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for synergy there between the two projects.
We still have quite a few questions, but I thought I would take a moment and before I ask the next question, well, after I ask the next question, Mario, I'm going to call on you and see if you have any questions from the Spanish language line. But the next question is, the community identified wanting to focus on the Central Avenue Bridge, which included bike, walking, etc. Why are we considering another pathway?
Marielle, would you like me to field this?
Yes, please. And because I think you have a longer connection to the project.
Okay, so dovetailing what Marielle said earlier regarding the 3rd Street corridor being a complementary low-stress bikeway, from a functional standpoint, that's the top priority. When you look at it from the details of the engineering involved, we've looked at the Central Avenue Bridge from a structural standpoint, and with the light rail being proposed there, any additions to the existing bridge would require significant modifications to the structure beneath the deck of the bridge, which would be quite costly. And so that low stress complementary facility with a new pedestrian bridge would be a better investment as far as this crossing is considered.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Mario, do you have anyone with questions on the Spanish language line?
There are no Spanish speaking questions at this moment.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Let me know if you do get any. Just type something in the chat box to have me call on you again. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mario.
Sure.
Next question, any preliminary thought process about ultimately extending this to the El Reposo Park and South Mountain?
So right now we're looking at this project, at these corridors and these boundaries that we've defined. But I think that as we start building the pieces of our network, we're always looking for those opportunities to further expand and further connect. So it's certainly you know, something that's always in the back of my mind as active transportation program manager, but there's no specific plan for what's next. But I think that, you know, getting this piece of the puzzle and in the network together always helps us to look at what's next and where do we go from here.
Is there any conversation around beautification of 3rd Street with this improvement, mainly the addition of trees to provide shade to pedestrians and bikers?
Yes, absolutely. And there are questions about that in the survey that I hope that you will take. But we are looking at opportunities for adding art and adding trees. And Tiffany, do you want to add any more to that?
Yes, thank you. I think what we're really excited and interested in hearing back from the community is an understanding of priorities. It is pretty clear that we have space and the opportunity here to provide shade with trees. We need to understand how to balance that priority with things like parking, with things like different concepts, for example, cool corridor concepts and so on. And so it is definitely a priority from the beginning, even before any consultants were hired from the City of Phoenix wanted to make sure that there is shade and a comfortable environment for pedestrians and bicycles. So that's a fact. And I think that where we need your help is to understand you know, a lot of the project has a lot of space, but there are some tighter, less spacious situations. And in those situations, how do we prioritize things? And so again, taking the survey is going to help us quite a bit.
Have you viewed, sorry, question wording. Have you incorporated the recommendations from the transit-oriented development plan in your planning thus far?
We've certainly looked at the TOD plans, and we're really, with this project, I think that we support the spirit of the TOD plans quite a bit in terms of looking to support biking and walking opportunities and safe and comfortable connections along the corridor. So I believe the TOD plan is still in draft form, so I don't want to speak to its final form yet, but we have been looking at that draft, and we have been looking at how we can make sure we can support the overall TOD plan and certainly kind of the TOD planning principles of connectivity.
Thanks, Marielle. Hot topic these days, what kind of protective barriers are being considered to keep cyclists safe, and how can we ensure that sufficient barriers are used on this project, i.e. not made from plastic?
So at this stage of the design process, we're really kind of looking for the alternatives and the overall concepts of two-way protected bike lane versus bike boulevard. You know, what will the path look like? As we move into the design process, that's when we'll really start looking at what are our vertical protection options and what makes the most sense for the corridor. So as much as I always want to push forward into design, right now we're still kind of at that conceptual level where we're figuring out what works before we figure out those precise details.
Thanks, Marielle. Two questions from the same person. To specify, you guys were planning as an option to remove a lane of traffic for the bike lane. Is that correct? And then how are you planning to negotiate with the property owners to get permission to build in those areas? And what will happen if you don't get that permission?
So for the bike lane, we're really looking at removing parking for to make space for the bike lane. It's not removing a lane of traffic. For most of the street, it's one lane in each direction, and we will maintain that. Tiffany, are there any locations where that's not true?
I don't believe so. And I'd also like to add that there are not the whole corridor, but there are certain situations within the corridor that parking can still exist. It's a small number. The corridor curb to curb width varies a lot. And so, I think you are correct, Mario.
Okay, definitely. In other areas, we are certainly going to be working with the property owners to make sure that we're able to create space for that bike path. But in that case, there are no existing lanes for car travel. So we'll be adding a biking and walking path.
And we have somebody who says they're comfortable riding with autos, but most people would feel safer with a divided roadway. I think they're talking about the two-way protected bike lanes that we have along 3rd Avenue in the Willow area. So that's one option. Is that not correct?
Yes, that is one of the options that we're looking at. So that's the two-way protected bike lane.
And then Buckeye Road, here's a new question. Buckeye Road gets backed up, especially at peak hours, and it backs up from Central to almost 7th Street. And the question is, was that factored into the planning at this point?
So at this point, we're certainly aware of the traffic along Buckeye. We're also aware that we'll have to make sure that we have a safe way for people to cross the street at 3rd Street and Buckeye. So as we move from the overall concept into the design phase of the process, that's when we'll really dig into the details of what's that appropriate crossing and how do we make sure that we're balancing the needs of people walking and biking and using the 3rd Street connector, along with making sure we're respecting and balancing the needs of the people driving along Buckeye.
Well, the group definitely warmed up. We have quite a few questions to go. So if the team is willing to stick around for a few minutes, we can go over time. If we can get a thumbs up from everybody that's okay. The next question is whether this project is 100% go or not. Will it get built?
I guess that one is probably for me, since Mariel's been doing a great job at answering the questions. Our intent on this is obviously it's pre-design, but the whole intent of pre-design is to be able to figure out what is feasible, where the community would like us to go with it to determine that support and what it would look like as we move to the next phase, which would be design and ultimately construction of the project. So this is a necessary step so we can put obviously some scope behind it where we're going to go with this, but also to identify the cost and that we're going to need to budget in to be able to move this forward. I know from our standpoint, I know Mariel is very, obviously active and no pun intended there for her interactive transportation program. And so we are moving forward with bicycle projects and active transportation projects around the city. And this is one of those ones that we have identified and we want to support and move forward with it. How it looks and how it feels will depend on how we go about this pre-design process and what input we get from the public as we move forward and figure out what's feasible. But in my mind, when I say 100% go, I mean, and we're moving forward 100%. Do we have it all budgeted out? No, because we need to figure out some of the details of what it's going to cost and the timing and some of the other things like that Mariel was talking about is land acquisition and easements and things like that, and other decisions and making sure we have the level of support to move forward with this. But everything looks good so far moving forward. So I'm very pleased with where we're at on this project.
Thanks, Keeney. Next question is, will there be a minimum of 25% shade canopy on this pathway as is the goal of the city? Again, we're getting into a lot of design questions at this point.
Mariel, would you like me to answer? Okay, so I'm a fan of the project, like big picture wise. A big reason is because over half of the project is planned along easements, either railroad easements or drainage easements. Also, the other half of the project is built in on streets that were designed and built, in our historic downtown. So spatially, I think originally they housed trees. They were definitely designed to do that. And so the entire corridor holds the minimum requirement to support trees up to a huge spatial opportunity to plant, more than just a street tree, which is, kind of what we're looking at. Where are our opportunities to really sort of create identity by expanding sort of shade and vegetation and so on. So I think this project has just by default the capacity to meet the 25% minimum, but I think it's going to far exceed that. Again, that's just based on, development budget, community will, political will, and so on. But spatially, we've got everything we need to plant trees.
Next question, has cost versus engagement been researched to ensure there's actual use compared to the costs and investment? And I know when I was first introduced to this project, one of the things that stood out to me was the huge opportunity and potential for connections where there aren't any currently. Would you like to speak to that, Marielle or Keeney?
I'll touch on that, and maybe Marielle can go a little more detail as far as her experience on active transportation projects like this. But one of the firm things I believe in is, and I spent a lot of my career before I came to street transportation working in the public transit industry. And I'll be the first to tell you the reason why a public transit system works is because it connects and it provides coverage. You don't get by with a public transit system that has one route going north or south, or one route going east or west. The true beauty of a system like that is interconnected, and you think the roadway network is the same way. If we just had Buckeye Road, or we just had 7th Avenue or 7th Street, there's some people could use that and it would work well for certain individuals and where they're traveling, but only when you have that interconnected system does a transportation network truly thrive. And I think the same thing is true with our bicycle network and our active transportation program network. If people don't have the ability to get to where they want to go and don't feel comfortable or safe doing that, then the chances of them going and using that and investing their time and energy in doing that and their safety in doing that are less. So I think the more we're able to invest in network improvements like this to make a connected network of active transportation, the more opportunity we're going to see people moving to that as a viable mode. But I know when people get concerned about the investment versus what's the outcome, well, that's true. We are concerned about people using the facilities we put in, but we have to take into consideration how is this part of the network and how does this contribute to the network. So I think we have a responsibility from the city's perspective, from the street transportation perspective, to move towards a network that makes people feel comfortable, that they feel comfortable using.
Hey, thank you, Keeney. I do want to add, as an active transportation planner, one thing we always say whenever we're talking about adding crossings for bike lanes is, well, you don't count how many people are swimming across a river in order to figure out whether or not to build a bridge. And so this is the first time in my career where I've gotten to really work on that specific problem. And then this is even more challenging because it's not just having to cross the river, but there are also connections that you really can't access along those easements, along those areas where the street doesn't go through. It is a challenge to know exactly how many people will be there. But throughout this project, we've heard through all of our engagement a huge amount of interest in connecting to this project. And it has all of the hallmarks of a project that gets a lot of active transportation use. It connects to a regional trail. So we're really tapping into this existing part of the network. You can go all the way to Tempe or to Mesa once you get to the Rio Salado. And we're also connecting connecting near transit, so that will help give people more opportunities to access transit. So I think we're really going to see a lot of use in terms of building out this low stress, family friendly biking and walking network that connects through kind of these existing areas where you really have to walk out of your way if you're trying to go along 3rd Street to get to the Rio Salado right now.
Thanks, Marielle. We're almost at the bottom. We have 2 more questions. And I want to thank everybody for submitting your questions and for being so engaged on this project. Next question, Chris mentioned the Central Avenue Bridge would need more investment versus the 3rd Street pathway or the new bridge pathway. What would be the cost differences between the 2? Do we know that at this time?
At this time in the process, we haven't put pencils to paper to get concrete numbers between the 2, but part of this pre-design process is to make sure we don't leave any stone unturned. So that'll be part of our process to investigate that and understand those cost differences to make an informed decision as we move forward. And really a big part of what we're about right now is just gathering input, and this input helps us to go into that process.
Thanks, Chris. The location is in a neighborhood full of history. Will you include art that reflects the story of the people who live here?
Yes, that is a great question. I'm going to let both Chris and Tiffany answer that because both of these projects are really thinking about that.
Yes, so again, as I stated in the last question, we're offering up the survey to gather more input, and really we're looking for that inspiration. As designers, we want to understand what the community's values are and what they want to see reflected in these projects. So we requested that was part of some of the questions in the survey to understand what the desire of the community is to see from an inspiration standpoint, that what we can build on as part of these projects, specifically as I look at the bridge.
As with regard to the corridor that runs along the 3rd Street alignment, north from Lincoln and south to the Rio Salado, what we would like to learn from you is you know, where you think something in the community needs to be highlighted along the corridor, or where you think that something needs to be honored or artwork placed. It is our intention to discuss how art can be incorporated both functionally and also as a centerpiece in the corridor. However, in a pre-designed project, we do not determine exact locations. We do not determine what the art is, but we do collect all that information. So we're very excited to hear from you and include that, so that when the City of Phoenix moves the project forward, all that information is ready to for the next phase to launch from.
Thank you, Chris. Tiffany, that concludes all of the questions that were submitted. I have captured the information in the chat so that the project team can review that. On your screen right now, you're seeing the project website, and the project website does include information about how to get in touch with the project team, as well as that all-important survey. So with that, Keeney, let me lead it back to you for some closing remarks, and then I'll finish with a tiny bit of housekeeping about what happens when this meeting ends. Oh, I see now, Marianne, that someone sent you a question directly. So hold off for half a second, Keeney, and let Marielle go ahead and answer that question.
Okay, I'm sorry. It took me a minute to figure out what was going on. I was like, how did Heather miss a question? But it was sent to me personally. So the question is, the Adeline Gray neighborhood from Pima to Durango along 3rd Street, Central Ave to 7th Street will be bisected by the bike ped path. This is an old neighborhood. How will the introduction of tourists, non-residents increase traffic impact? So for this project, as we're looking at proposing biking and walking amenities, we're really looking to better serve people biking and walking. So it won't bring in new car traffic because we're really building for people to bike and walk along this area. So it will increase the number of people in the neighborhood traveling along this path. And that's the goal of the project, to create that connection. And so because it's a biking and walking path, people are not going to be driving quickly or honking. They're not going to be in cars. They're going to be traveling at very slow, safe human speeds that respect the surrounding neighborhood.
Great question. Keeney, would you like to wrap it up?
All right. I won't make it lengthy. I just wanted to, again, thank everybody. I was amazed at all the questions that we got here tonight. I'm very thankful that we have, and that means that we have people on the line who are tuning in, who are very engaged and interested in what in their communities and what improvements we might have ready for the community to be able to provide better access and better support active transportation. So I can't emphasize enough how thankful I am to have that engagement and interest. But I will also say that something I always tell to my staff as well is when we do projects, and we can do good projects on our own when we're doing projects out there. But I think we only get to move from good projects to great projects when we have the engagement of the community and the support of the community. And I really have that goal for these two projects. I think these can be transformative projects in connecting people to different transportation mode that they may not be interested, but because they just don't have the access to it now. And being able to provide that is something I'm enthusiastic about. I know Marielle and the team who are working on this are enthusiastic about. So I ask everybody who's here on this line to continue to be engaged and stay informed about the project as it goes through. And I'm sure Heather's going to tell you a little bit more about that as well. But again, thank you again, and have a great, wonderful evening.
Thank you, Keeney. I just wanted to let everybody know something we did to make things a little bit easier for you. When this session ends, you'll find a screen that asks if you'd like to be redirected to the project page. This link is very safe for you to click on, and it'll take you to the page that features our project survey. So thank you again for your time and interest. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. And we plan to post this meeting on our website no later than Monday, but probably by the end of the week. So thanks again, everyone. Have a good and safe evening.